nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn no closure, moving closer. No exposure, I just wanna be a loner. Some can't stay sober, looking over all their shoulders, like moving boulders just to get out of the home. It sucks, I've had enough, I don't wanna feel the stuck under the rug, all my problems that I shove. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Order in the court.
Here for today for the purposes of arraignment on the charge. Mr. King?
Ms. Bustamante will waive formal arraignment and enter pleas of not guilty.
All right.
In the serene landscape of St. Martin's, Missouri, too, families had no idea they were on the brink of a tragedy that would shatter their lives and shake the community of St. Martin's to its core. Elizabeth Alton, a bright-eyed 9-year-old, was known for her playful spirit and the joy she brought to those around her. She lived with her family, 4 houses down from Alyssa Bustamante, a teenager whose outward appearance masked the turmoil within. Alyssa Eileen Bustamante was born on January 28, 1994, into a life filled with instability. Her mother's battle with addiction and her father's incarceration left Alyssa and her siblings in the care of their grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke. As Alyssa entered her teenage years, signs of distress began to surface.
He had mixed it with music and posted it showing her grabbing an electric cattle fence. She then urges her little brothers to grab the electrified fence.
Around 2007, friends and family started to notice changes in her behavior. A suicide attempt led to her hospitalization, revealing the depth of her struggles with mental health. In the days leading up to October 21st, Alyssa dug a grave in the woods behind her house, the beginning to the grim act she was planning. On that fateful Wednesday, as the sun began to set, Alyssa set her plan into motion. She persuaded her younger sister to invite Elizabeth to the woods under the pretense of friendly play. Unknown to the innocent child, she was walking into a trap meticulously laid by someone she considered a neighbor and a friend.
Okay, I just split her throat, I strangled her.
Strangled her?
Mm-hmm.
You strangled her with your hands?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a knife on you?
Yes.
Did you cut her throat at any time?
Yes.
Cut her throat afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
The journal she kept became a key piece of evidence, as it contained a haunting entry from the day of the murder. Alyssa had attempted to obscure the words with scribbles, but forensic experts were able to recover the chilling confession that detailed the killing with a sense of pride and exhilaration. The words, "I just killed someone. I them and their throat and them, now they're dead. I don't know how to feel ATM," followed by, "It was amazing. As soon as you get over the oh me god I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now, lol," were penned down, providing a stark and disturbing account of her actions. In a moment of remorse though, Alyssa addressed the court and the Alton family during her sentencing. Her voice trembled as she expressed her regret, saying, "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would. I'm sorry."
Basically the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then there would have been no reason to have accepted that offer.
She took a plea deal and was sentenced to life imprisonment with concurrent 30-year imprisonment. Alyssa seemed to have the demons she's battling with, and that was why she did what she did.
Order in the court.
Mackenzie Shirilla was only 17 when she made a decision that would haunt 2 families forever. In the early hours of a July night in 2022, her car, a Toyota Camry, roared down a Cleveland street with her boyfriend Dominic Russo and his friend Davian Flanagan inside. It was a speed that promised destruction, and in a heartbeat, the car smashed into a brick wall, taking both young men's lives. Shirilla herself survived the crash, but as prosecutors would later argue, this wasn't a tragic accident, it was murder. The toxic relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic had been spiraling out of control, and that night it came to a violent and devastating conclusion. According to the prosecution, Mackenzie had a history of violent threats towards Dominic. She had once threatened to crash her car with him in it and had made scary statements about breaking into his home and damaging his property. But no one expected those threats to turn into a real-life horror, one that would leave 2 families broken and a community stunned. At her trial in 2023, the evidence was clear. This wasn't just reckless driving. The court was shown a haunting video capturing the final moments before the crash. It showed Mackenzie's Camry speeding towards the building without hesitation, no attempt to brake, no swerve to avoid the inevitable. The silence was chilling. Unlike the usual chaos in stories like this, there were no screams, no panic, just an unsettling calm. What you're witnessing, the footage, the crash, those final seconds, isn't a scene from a film. These were real people in their last, excruciating moments. Common Pleas Court Judge Nancy Margaret Russo, who presided over the case, called it controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. In her words, Mackenzie had morphed from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels. Dominic Russo, 20, was pronounced dead at the scene, along with 19-year-old Davian Flanagan, who had likely never imagined his night would end in tragedy. Mackenzie was rushed to the hospital, but she would eventually face the consequences of her actions in court. At her sentencing, she was handed 2 concurrent life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. However, Judge Russo made it clear that it was unlikely Mackenzie would ever walk free.
From others' uncorroborated statements without any medical testimony or records is not persuasive. It is also important to remember that even if Mackenzie intended to also die in this crash, that is irrelevant. A failed suicide attempt is not a defense to murder.
In the courtroom, Mackenzie tearfully addressed the victims' families, her voice trembling as she claimed she couldn't remember what happened that night.
I wish I could take all your feelings, and I'm so sorry.
But for the families of Dominic and Davian, her apology rang hollow. The video evidence, the history of threats, and the violent end to the young men's lives left little room for sympathy. They would never see their sons again, and no apology could ever fill the gaping void left behind. Mackenzie's defense had argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove she intended to kill her passengers, but the cold reality of that video footage, the car accelerating without hesitation, silenced any doubts. In court, it was even revealed that Mackenzie had even posted a video on social media in the days before the crash, boasting that drugs and narcotics couldn't affect her. Whether or not substances played a role that night, her reckless disregard for life was evident. The crash was the tragic end of a young life's downward spiral, but it also tore 2 other lives away in the process. Dominic, the boyfriend with whom she had shared a complicated, volatile relationship, and Davion, an innocent friend caught in the crossfire, were gone forever. After the conviction, Mackenzie's lawyers immediately filed an appeal, hoping to reduce her sentence. They argued clerical errors and insufficient evidence, but the appellate court upheld the original verdict. Mackenzie Shirilla would spend the next 15 years, if not the rest of her life, in prison.
Order in the court.
Joshua Phillips' story begins in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where he entered the world on March 17, 1984. His early life was marred by the shadow of his father, Steve, a man whose struggles with addiction and violence instilled an atmosphere of fear within the family home. Melissa, Joshua's mother, bore the brunt of Steve's unpredictable temper, a temper that also loomed over young Joshua, setting strict boundaries and expectations that would shape his childhood. The Phillips family eventually moved south, leaving behind the cold of Pennsylvania for the warmth of Florida. Across the street lived Maddie Clifton, a vibrant 8-year-old with whom Joshua shared a simple, innocent friendship. They were children, neighbors, and playmates. On November 3, 1998, Joshua Phillips and Maddie Clifton decided to play a game of baseball, an innocent pastime that would soon turn tragic. During the game, a stray ball struck Maddie in the eye, causing her to bleed and cry out in pain. Panic set in for Joshua, whose fear of his father's violent temper overrode any sense of rational thought.
Phillips is not a monster, but because of an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness, he engaged in a monstrous act.
In a desperate bid to silence Maddie's cries and avoid his father's punishment, Joshua dragged her into his house. The situation rapidly escalated as he struck Maddie with the baseball bat and, in a futile attempt to conceal his actions, hid her body beneath his bed. Soon, the community realized that Maddie was missing. A search was conducted and Joshua joined. They had no idea what Joshua had done. Phillips was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder, a verdict that carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
It is the sentence of this court that you be delivered by the sheriff of Polk County into the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida to be confined in prison without the benefit of parole for the rest of your natural life.
Over the years, the case made its way through the appellate courts, challenging the legitimacy of sentencing a juvenile to life without parole. During the emotionally charged resentencing, a now adult Phillips expressed profound regret for his actions, shedding tears over the innocence lost and the pain inflicted.
I did something horrible. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn no closure, moving closer. No exposure, I just wanna be alone.